Let's go ahead and create some network security groups within our Azure subscription. So to begin, we'll just make a resource group to contain our new network security group objects. So we'll come in here, add new resource group, East US. I'll just call this one NSG. And so in this new NSG resource group, we're going to create a network security group object. So go to the marketplace and we'll just start typing network security and select network security group from the list of available options. Hit that, hit create. It's important to note you can have many different network security groups. There's no limit to the number that you can have in theory. There's some practical limits in terms of what it will support, but from a design standpoint, you can design and have any form of structure that you want, any configuration that you want. The idea being that a network security group is just a named collection of what are, at their simplest form, firewall rules that can then be applied in a number of different locations. They can be applied to subnets, they can be applied to interfaces to just govern the traffic that goes in and out of whatever that object is. If it's an interface, it's whatever goes in and out of the virtual machine the interface is connected to. If it's connected to a subnet, then it's traffic in and out of that subnet. So you can imagine having a network security group restricting web traffic to a particular web server or to an entire subnet. I call this one web app traffic. Put it in my existing group. And then click create. So this will go ahead and deploy that network security group. And it takes just a second for that to deploy. So it's completed, and we can see here's our web app traffic network security group. Now, there's four things that you'll really work with in here. You've got inbound security rules, outbound security rules, you have network interfaces, and you have subnets. Inbound and outbound security rules are exactly what they sound like. This is where you'll configure the rules that govern traffic that's allowed in and traffic that's allowed out. And you can see that there's a couple of rules that are put in place by default. For inbound, there's a deny all as the default, I should say as the last. What that does is that creates a notion of if something is not listed here, then it's denied. And then you have an outbound, which is a deny all as the last rule, priority is 65,500, which again, anything that's not listed as an exception there is denied by default. As you can see, there's a couple of basic rules. So for outbound security, by default, you're allowed all traffic that's going to your individual virtual network. That is allowed. And then all traffic to the internet is allowed. So really, it allows you to move anywhere within your VNet or to the internet in terms of outbound traffic. For inbound traffic, you're allowed from within your virtual network, but not from any other virtual network or the internet. And then if you have a load balancer, you're allowed inbound traffic from the load balancer. Otherwise, no traffic is allowed in. Network interfaces indicates the interface this is connected to, or the term they use is associated with. And then which subnets this network security group is associated with. In the event that you have a network, two different network security groups, one is associated with the subnet, the other associated with an individual interface, the subnet is evaluated first, then the interface, with the most restrictive rules winning. To add rules, it's a very simple process. We can view our default rules or we can hide them. Again, just by selecting this option to either turn them on or turn them off. To add a rule is really very simple. There are two modes that you can add. There's a basic mode and an advanced mode. We'll start with basic because it's the most common and the simplest for most people to work with. So if I want to simply add a port, basic lists the most common ports of the most common server-side services. For example, DNS, FTP, Secure Shell, email, which is SMTP, email POP3, SQL Server, Rabbit, WinRM, etc., and so on. These are some of the most common services that will be run or hosted on Azure. So if you got a web server, for example, you want to enable HTTP traffic, all you've got to do is select HTTP, give it a description, change the name if you want, and then hit OK, and it will add that rule as either an allow inbound rule or an allow outbound rule. I don't really need to have an allow outbound because all outbound traffic is allowed by default anyway. But here's my inbound HTTP rule. I can now add, for example, SSL. Again, we're going to use the basic method. Select HTTPS. Now I need to adjust the priority. Bump that to 101 and click OK. Priority allows you to structure your rules so that you have the most restrictive rules first, followed by the least restrictive rules. I should say the least restrictive rules followed by the most restrictive rules. And you can use this just to structure the order of evaluation. And if you need to move one rule above another, you can make those changes. Now, one suggestion that I make for folks, and I didn't actually follow my own suggestion here, is when you configure a priority, always leave an incremental value. So for example, instead of using 101, use 110. What that allows, if you have 100, 110, 120, and you need to make a movement, you can now move a rule, for example, to 115. If it was 100, 101, there's nowhere in between 100 and 101 for you to go. So it becomes very difficult. You might have to reorder a bunch of rules or make a bunch of changes. By leaving kind of a 0 on the end of your priority, it at least gives you the option to insert a rule between two others at some point in the future. So I'm just going to save that change. You can see it right here. So now I could, for example, insert a priority of 115 if I wanted to at some point in the future. So it's a useful guidance to follow. So there we go. Creating an advanced rule, which, and here's the default if you just click add, allows you to build what they call a 5-tuple rule, which is basically port protocol, subnet, port protocol, source destination, subnet. So this is the 5 elements of a basic firewall rule. So we can, for example, choose either any address, we can choose a particular IP address or IP address range, or we can choose something called a service tag. Now, a service tag is an interesting internal Azure tag where, let's say that you have a number of VNets or subnets in a given location. You don't necessarily have to list those specific IP values in rules. You can use the service tag and it will identify them. So for example, you can accept all traffic from storage regardless of its Azure IP address. If it's Azure storage, it's allowed. If it's from your virtual network, right? So anywhere in this virtual network, it's allowed. So it's a way of you specifying a type of source or destination without needing the specific IP address values. We're going to do as an example here from a particular IP address. So let's say that I want to restrict it from my corporate network, and let's say I know that my egress point in my corporate network is 52.14.36.54. I can type that in as a specific IP address. So this is an actual dedicated IP address. So for an actual IP, we'd do a subnet of 32, indicating this is the entire destination. Source port ranges, asterisk or star means all, and we can now put in any port range that we want, which is hover gives us a tooltip. Kind of some examples of what we can do: individual port ranges with commas, or using a dash to indicate a range. So we'll just say any inbound port destination. We'll go to any address, but a particular port, and let's do port 888. And this is going to be on TCP. We want to allow it, and we'll make this one 115. Accept a name, click OK, and we've now made an advanced rule. So again, there's nothing fundamentally different at the end of the day between the advanced and basic, except with the basic you can select from some predefined services. With advanced, you can configure all the elements of the rule with meticulous detail to create the actual rule. If you're familiar with firewall configuration in any way, shape, or form, whether it's the Windows firewall, whether it's a third-party firewall product, really any type of firewall, or even router or switch configuration, all these elements, all these rule elements of source port, destination port, protocol, source address, and destination address that make up this 5-tuple rule are sort of standard. Well, and that's sort of, they are standard elements of rules across all sorts of platforms and products. So once I've created my network security group, the next step is I need to associate it with things. And so I can associate it with subnet objects. So choose a virtual network. For example, here's the network I created earlier. Choose the subnet. And so now all traffic going to and from this subnet is governed by these inbound and outbound security rules. I can do the same thing with a network interface. Now to do that, I need an available interface. The only interfaces that I have available to me are on 2 existing virtual machines that I know are already associated with a particular network security group. So we're going to go just create a new interface, and then we'll come back and associate it with. And so I could actually pre-create network interfaces before I even create virtual machines. And then when I create the virtual machine, I can pick the network interface that already has, for example, public IP configuration or network security group configuration already assigned to it. You can build these things in almost any order that you want. So we're going to build a new interface. So we're going to create this interface. I'm just going to call this one netint1. The virtual network that it's going to be associated with. It'll pick up the subnet information from the virtual network in the event that it's a there's more than one you can choose. We're going to leave it at dynamic. We're not going to affiliate a network security group, and we'll throw this in our NSG resource group just to keep it together with everything else, and click create. And so what this will do is produce a network interface object. This will take just a second to deploy and set up. Now while that's happening, we're going to go back to our resource group. Going to go back to this new network security group that we created. Here's, by the way, the network interface. And we're just going to affiliate our network security group with that available interface. And we'll see this appear in the list here in just a second. There we go. I can now actually go back to that interface, and you can now see that it's picked up the network security group association. And from here I can unassociate it. I can set it to none. I can change it to additional network security groups and just really make any changes that I want. Just bear in mind that it can only be affiliated with one network security group at a time. So that's our look at how we create and manage network security groups.